It may come as a bit of a surprise to many of you, but technologists are a particularly optimistic group. Here's why. Most of the nerds I know, and I know a lot of nerds, believe this, that the future is not a story of inevitability with us as passive participants in its unfolding. The future is a story that is actively written with us as engineers and architects in its building. Technological advances have fundamentally changed the world. Often this requires that we believe in a new future and then set our sights on building it. Sometimes that requires we believe in seemingly impossible things. And let me give you a few examples. So in 1895, Lord Kelvin declared that heavier than air flying machines were impossible. And in 1876, a Western Union memo read that this telephone has too many shortcomings to be considered as a means of communication. And my personal favorite, Time magazine article in 1966, which declared, remote shopping, while entirely feasible, will flop because women like to get out of the house. The now infamous statement from Ken Olsen in December of 1977 when he declared there is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. Now, these statements seem funny today, but only in retrospect. Only because a dedicated and small group of individuals believed in something. They chose to believe in something and then make it so, in that order. The panelists this afternoon are familiar with this basic concept. Each of them has been centrally involved in changing our expectations about what is possible in the building of a new reality. So Bree Pettis, a rock star among makers, envisioned and built a world where manufacturing was no longer in the hands of a select few, but in the hands of many. Juliana Rotich, who built a world where the internet could empower individual voices and groups to fuel humanitarian disaster relief and report violence in elections. That started with a small group of believers. And Bouverot, who is using mobile technologies in healthcare, education, and transportation because she believes things can be different and better. And Shibulal, who is part of building an entrepreneurial India after economic reform. His company was started with 7 engineers and $250. Now, a common thread for these emerging technologies is the power of diversity and scale to unlock innovation and to solve some of the world's most difficult problems. So, Bree, let's start with you. You and your team built Makerbot, which took an existing industrial technology and sought to bring it to everyone. 23,000 Makerbots have been sold since 2009. So let's start with the basics, because some of the people here may not know how a Makerbot works. Let's suppose that President Clinton and Bono have an idea, and they want to build it. How would they go about doing that?
So good ideas in technology usually require 3 parts. There's electronics, software, and then the hardware. And so let's put Bono in charge of the electronics. Let's put the president in charge of the software. And then they work out something that works. And when they need to package it up and create a way of showing it to the world, they would start to prototype it. And they would probably use a Makerbot like the Makerbot desktop 3D printer. And they would try it out, and it probably wouldn't look perfect the first time, so they'd try it again. And because the machine and the material are affordable, they could iterate and fail as many times as they needed until they were satisfied, and then they could go into production. If it's short run, they can make as many as they need right on their desktop at home with their Makerbot. Or if they want to go big time, they've already made that jump that usually takes companies millions and millions of dollars, and they've probably made it in a couple of days of iteration and innovation.
So people talk a lot about 3D printing. How does it actually work? I take a 3D object, and then I want to make it. I'm going to make it in slices, right? That's how a Makerbot works.
You've got it. You start with an idea, and you either go to our site, thingiverse.com, and maybe somebody's already designed it. If not, then you design it yourself in 3D modeling software that's become, there's a lot of things you can use now that's free. And then once you have your design, you send it to the machine, and it builds it up layer by layer. It draws it. And then on top of that drawing, it draws another one. And on top of that, it draws another layer. And layer by layer, it creates your object. I like to joke that it's a super advanced technological automated glue gun. But that's basically how it works.
That's great. So Tom Knight, who is an MIT engineer, computer scientist, and biologist, said that the 19th century was about the control and manipulation of energy. The 20th century was about the control and manipulation of information. And the 21st century is about the control and manipulation of matter. So additive manufacturing, 3D printing, is really about that, the control and manipulation of matter. And we're seeing it transform every industry, from movies to medicine. The 3D faces in the stop-action movie Paranorman were 3D printed. And last year, doctors printed a dissolvable tracheal splint that saved a baby's life. Perhaps exercising less good judgment, the students at Cornell's Fab Lab printed a miniature version of the space shuttle in scallops and cheese. I don't know why. And I think the remarkable thing about this is that any one of those things taken individually is not world-changing, but taking an aggregate, they represent a transformational force that looks a bit like the transformational force of the internet. So is that how you see it?
Yeah, we get asked a lot, like, what's the killer app for having a Makerbot? And, you can make a lot of things. Hundreds of thousands of choices of things you can make, and so it's not actually one of them. We basically say, like, the killer app is you can make anything with this, which is a big answer to something where normally people are like, well, what's the little thing that'll make this pop? And it's the ability to be super flexible.
So you have an example of a make anything internationally and so on. Tell us the story of
this is a great
RoboHand.
Two guys, one in Seattle and one in South Africa, wanted to make a prosthetic hand. The guy in South Africa had lost his fingers in an accident. And in the hospital, he's like, I'm going to rebuild myself. True maker. And so they worked together to make a prosthetic for him. And then they got approached by the father of a friend who is the father of a kid with amniotic band syndrome, who, when you have this, you're born without fingers or thumb, but you have a palm. And having just worked on their own prosthetics project, they made the kid a hand. And it allowed him to catch a ball and pick up things and draw and do stuff. And it attaches to his palm, and when he bends his palm, the fingers close. And normally prosthetics cost like $10,000 or more. And for kids, they normally don't get them because they grow out of them like sneakers. But this is $5 in material. So if it breaks or if they need to make another one, no big deal.
So, Bree, you said that part of the reason you can produce products as aggressively and on the timescales that you do is because you have your engineers together with those who are making the products, right? This is a theme that I also believe in. In fact, Motorola just moved manufacturing of its smartphones back to the United States in Fort Worth.
Yeah. That's so great.
We were high-fiving about that in the background, right? Yeah, high five. So one might argue that 3D printers are an example of that on a massive scale.
Yeah, first of all, it's great to manufacture in the United States of America. I love that our engineers get to walk down the street. We engineer in Brooklyn and we assemble in Brooklyn down the way. And it allows us to develop products faster, iterate more quickly, and solve problems faster, make better products. And And there's another ingredient there, Brooklyn pride, that we get to have in those machines. And, yeah, there you go, Brooklyn in the house. And I got to say, this is something that when you have a 3D printer, you get as well, because you're manufacturing on your desktop. We have, our primary customers are engineers, industrial designers, and architects who get to iterate on their desks. So if they make a version of the product and they get it off there and they don't like it, they don't have to show their boss. They can just throw it away and make another one, no big deal. And it gets super interesting when it gets to ordinary folks, and they make stuff just because they want it. And it really inspires people to become entrepreneurs, and because it teaches you, when you have a Makerbot, it's a manufacturing education in a box. It teaches you that you can fail as many times as you need to get it right.
To the end point, yeah. So, Juliana, we've been talking about making in the physical world, but of course that's a force or a power that starts to mimic the accessibility and scale of forces in the digital world, right? And so the beginnings of that actually have similar, humble, somewhat messy starts, right? In 1969, the first packet-switched message was sent from UCLA to SRI, and the word login was transmitted. Only the first two letters, an L and an O, got through, and then a buffer overflow crashed the system. So it was a very humble beginning. Now the internet is like a communal mind. It becomes a force where we can express ourselves, where we can empower as a group. And I think Ushahidi is a perfect example of that. Can you talk a little bit about what's happened with Ushahidi?
Sure. Speaking of humble beginnings, Ushahidi's beginnings started in Kenya in 2008 after contentious elections, and the problem that we faced at that particular time was information flow. When we wanted as much information about what was going on in the country, when we turned on our TVs, they were showing The Sound of Music. So we turned to the internet, and we turned to the community of bloggers that had come together, and we said, how do we use blogs, Twitter, simple SMS messaging to gather information about what was going on? Since then, that was in 2008, it's been 5 years, the organization has grown in adoption. So it started from the context of elections, but now it's become a very useful tool around disaster preparedness, from Haiti to Japan to other countries, and also the emerging practice around corruption mapping, from Zimbabwe to Panama to even Kosovo. And the most amazing thing is the fact that this is now available in more than 35 languages and is being used in 159 countries from the humble beginnings of Kenya. So I think the interesting thing about that network effect is this would not have happened were it not for the internet, because the internet is the playground on which we were able to quickly prototype the first version of Ushahidi, and then to coalesce the global community, not just the Kenyan community, the global community, to join and add the code, to participate, to translate, and to be part of this idea of digital humanitarianism. And I think, going back to Bree's point about prototyping, we're now starting to see how innovation can happen on the edge, particularly in Kenya, where we have problems with electricity and connectivity. These are the areas where we love to prototype, and I can tell you more about.
Sure, you have this brick system with you. You've described Ushahidi as a form of collective intelligence. So obviously free and open is part of that, but also this new invention?
Absolutely. So when we think about the goals of Ushahidi, we think about the need to have information flow from the bottom up. And when I moved back to Kenya to join my colleague Eric, and we realized that connectivity is a really big problem. When the power would go out, our internet connection would go out. Yet we've got ubiquitous GSM connections in the form of 3G and 3.75G, and some other areas have 4G networks. How do we leverage that so that when the main connection goes down, we can use those GSM networks? So we created the brick, which is a smart modem that enables anyone to connect and to easily have a backup generator for the internet, if you want to call it. And it basically allows for the coders who are part of the community at the iHub to continue working, to continue coding, to continue being part of the global conversation. And we see it as the bedrock, or at least the foundation, for more making and more prototyping. And in this case, we're also manufacturing in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So Bree and Juliana are both TED Fellows. They've known each other for a while. Are you starting to see interactions between this digital scale and diversity and making scale and diversity? What kind of interactions are you seeing?
I think I should say one of the cool things about Ushahidi is that it's a project that's dedicated itself to not just solving individual problems, but making that infrastructure available for other people who have similar problems. And this is a theme that's happening now where people make progress and then they share their progress so that other people can use it. And we do that too. We have a community where people share their designs and ideas and build off each other's projects. And I think this is one of the things that's coming down the pike as one of the most powerful movements of this century, is the ability to share and build off other people's work.
Absolutely. Openness is actually a resource because it opens up the problem-solving space to a lot more, a wider scale of contributions, and that can actually accelerate the rate at which things happen. We've seen it with Ushahidi and also in the field that Bree works in.
You mentioned that you were particularly proud of your team at this time, and I'm sure that everyone here joins me in wishing you gentle healing for you and your family and your country. Can you say a little bit about what's happened in your community of collective intelligence in this time?
The last week has been extremely difficult for those who may not have known about the attacks at the Westgate Mall in Kenya. It was devastating and tragic. More than 68 people lost their lives in a terrorist attack. It was very brutal. It was traumatizing not only for the team, because one of our members, his family was actually in the mall, but they were able to be rescued early on in the process. And we got together on Monday and we looked at the problem that we needed to solve, which was, how do we know that our small team, how do we check in with each other? And the most incredible thing is that we didn't meet to set out to build something, but within 48 hours, the team came up with an app called the Ping app, which allows small teams, families, small organizations to send out quick messages to a predefined group. Are you okay? Can you confirm that you're okay? And if we don't hear back from you, then we know who are the first people, where to take our resources to look for someone. So that's been extremely encouraging and inspiring, not only for our team, and we're going to share that and make that available for others to use and to build off of. The other thing that was built within 10 hours was the blood donation app, which people can find out where they can donate blood. We saw a lot of people from all walks of life in Kenya go out in droves to give blood because that was a major, major need. And the Red Cross has been incredible in responding to this particular attack. So thank you very much.
Yeah, congratulations. Congratulations. So speaking of starting with small teams, let's go down to Shibu. Your company started with 7 engineers and $250. It grew to scale of hundreds of thousands. And you've talked a bit about the change, the economic reform change in India, and what it meant for increasing the diversity and scale of people who could be entrepreneurs. So what does that look like?
So Infosys started in 1981. So India was a completely different country in 81. It was a country of license Raj. It was a country of control. There was Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. So one really could not do business in India in 1981. Then in the early 90s, there were a number of reforms which happened, which opened the economy to all the possibilities. And in many ways, Infosys is a poster child of the modern India, which actually opened up to investments and to entrepreneurship. More importantly, we got benefited from the communication revolution because communication allowed us to be part of the global world. And the cost of communication came down, and we benefited from it. We started out with 7 people, $250. Today, our market cap is somewhere between $20 to $25 billion. We employ about 160,000 people worldwide. The secondary employment would be about 3 times, so totally about 600,000 people, primary and secondary employment worldwide. And our clients are also global. So I think we have come a long way, and we are a very innovative company. So today, our innovations are not only being used by our clients, but they are being used by us and our clients to provide scale benefits to the society itself. So, the theme of the conversation is technology. So when I look at technology, instead of looking at breakthrough technology, I look at technology as a breakthrough element to create progress. And that is where today we participate, especially in India.
So you've talked about solving big problems like income inequality, access to health care. How has that scale, diversity impacted those areas?
So actually, let me give you an example. If you look at a country like India, it's a country of contradictions. On one end, you have million engineers coming out every year, but you have 14 million people 14 million children who are not in school. If you look at healthcare, 70% of the healthcare available in India is in the urban areas, whereas 70% of the population is in the rural areas. Give you another example. We have 300 million people in the banking system, but we have close to 400 million people who have no access to the banking system at all. So recently, we created this innovation called Mobile Wallet. It's a financial inclusion platform which is rolled out on the cell phones, on the mobile phones, not on the smartphones. This will work on the most simple phones. And by rolling it out, what we have achieved is to bring in millions of people into the banking system. Now, we are not a communication service provider, but we worked with Airtel. Airtel is a communication service provider in India. And rolling out this platform has enabled millions of people to join the financial system and actually work outside the cash economy. There are many other examples. If you look at GE, for example, they have done research in India. They have come up with a Doppler machine, which is $8,000 a piece. Usually, it is about $100,000 to $150,000 if you are in the other parts of the world. By creating this equipment, $8,000, now it's available to the rural parts of India, China, many of the other developing worlds. So when I look at technology, I look at it as a enabler to create new kind of innovations which are affordable, leaner, and durable. See, traditionally, we have built innovations which are, in my mind, expensive, smarter, and faster. But today, we need to look at it in a different way.
I think we're seeing that across the board when it comes to the ability to make, the ability to communicate, the ability to participate in many other fields than would otherwise be possible. So, Anne, we talk about the 3.3 billion unique subscribers worldwide in the mobile industry, undoubtedly the most widely deployed technology of all time in the world. You've talked about increasing that number by several-fold, really, ultimately, starting with about 700 million more connections to the internet. And you've talked about its potential impact in education, in healthcare, and transportation. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you see as possible to build there?
Yes, with great pleasure. I mean, first of all, I'm thrilled that mobile actually has been mentioned already a couple of times. And it is the farthest reaching technology in the world today. 3.3 billion people, as you say, that's men and women that we can reach in every country of the world, and that's the farthest reaching technology. So there are all sorts of examples. I mean, there's the examples of financial inclusion that were just mentioned here. Of course, Kenya, we heard this very emotional testimony. I think we're all sharing this and hoping for the best. But I think we all need to remember Kenya as such an innovative country on the basis of the mobile penetration. So M-Pesa clearly there, all the initiatives around energy and access to energy through a SIM card in a solar panel or a brick or something that will give you this individual access to energy that you can pay as you go, which is so important in a market like Kenya, which is so important in a market like India, where we recently made a study showing that 24%, almost a quarter of electricity is wasted in India, either through inefficient distribution or power theft. So if you optimize and individualize the distribution of energy, you can then give access to so many more people.
Can you talk a little bit about how enhanced connectivity allows you to manage things on that kind of scale?
Mm-hmm. So it's, I mean, that question makes people think of a big brother thing, but actually it's something that's much more simpler and much more individual. For example, either a brick or a solar panel in which you put a SIM card, that's something you can take home. And if you take it home and then you pay as you go, you don't have to worry about, can I pay for electricity for a month and subscribe on a yearly contract? Well, no, I'll pay when I have money. It's affordable. It's equivalent to kerosene or a bit lower. And then you can charge your cell phones, because we all say cell phones and simple ones, not only smartphones, are so powerful to change people's lives, but you need to charge them. So power and
they're not exactly mobile if they're plugged into the wall, right?
Exactly. But so you need to be able to charge them and then bring them with you and do all the things you want.
Right.
So you can do energy, you can do health. We just had a biking ride between Brussels and Barcelona of people with diabetes. So diabetes is, first of all, something that we estimate will be about 1 in 10 people by 2030. It's particularly prevalent it is in the US, in Europe, in India. It's big. But people with diabetes can live normal lives, and they can even do a bike ride between Brussels and Barcelona. If you monitor constantly in real time through a mobile application their sugar blood level and ensure that insulin is then given to them appropriately. So we can do wonderful things, for example, in the area of health through mobile.
That's great. I want to talk a little bit about girls and women. You've been a strong advocate. I think that it's important to note that we've made some advances with girls and women in math and science from the perspective of understanding their aptitude and for them even to understand their aptitude. So Natalie Angier wrote an article in the New York Times on September 2nd that was entitled "The Mystery of the Missing Women in Science." And let me just give you a few of the statistics she quoted. Nationwide, the grade point average in high school math and science is 2.76 out of 4 for girls and 2.56 out of 4 for boys. The message of equal aptitude is starting to be seen, as I mentioned, and penetrating the youth. A 2009 study of more than 21,000 ninth grade students had girls and boys equally reporting that they were confident and capable in math and science. They clearly have the aptitude. The problem starts to break down, or the problem starts to occur in the aspiration. So by the time they get to college, 29% of male college students choose math and science, only 15%, about half, of the girls choose math and science. And although women are earning 60% of the bachelor's degrees, only 20% of their degrees are in computer science, 20% in physics, and 18% in engineering. So maybe you could say a few words about why you think that is, what maybe each of us could do to help advance women and girls in math and science.
Well, with pleasure. I mean, maybe the first thing is, if you look at this panel, this is a wonderful panel. I think we're all geeks in one form or another, and we have a good representation of women on this panel, so I think this is good. And I'm drawing attention to this because I think part of the solution is showing that it is possible. and you can be wonderful men and be geeks, and you can be wonderful women, very diverse women, and be geeks. And I think part of this, it's okay, you have different ways of having a future. It's not only an aptitude thing, it's I can dream of this because I can see people who do that. I think that's very, very important. So there's a couple of things we do at the GSMA to try and further push this subject. And so I'll just mention these two. One is we have an M Women initiative, which we launched in 2009 with Secretary Clinton. And we're very, very grateful because she helped us raise this to a very high platform. And this was a commitment by mobile operators in the world to include women. And for example, in Iraq, the mobile operator there has launched specific services and hired female call center agents and female staff to make sure they were providing services that would attract women, and they've been able to go from 20% women in their customer base to now more than 40%. So they've added 2 million women who now have access to mobile and didn't. And Iraq isn't exactly your easiest market for that. And our second initiative is we have Connected Women events. We will be holding our second annual Connected Women events in New York on the 10th and 11th of October. That's a call for participation for all the great women and men in the room. The previous one was in Brussels, and we're committed to doing that to enhance the visibility of women in the industry.
We have an international panel. We have diversity across field and discipline. I'd like to maybe ask Bree and Juliana and Shibu if you could comment on what you're seeing by way of participation from women in the maker community within your iHub and in India generally. So starting with you, Bree.
I mean, I'm hiring them.
Yay.
I mean, my leadership team, the president of Makerbot and our CFO are both very powerful women who I just love to work with every day because they're the best. And our engineering team is very significantly female. And it's not just the bottom positions. We put them in positions of leadership. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
That's great. Bree has also started an initiative to get making into the schools, and I assume in part because the erosion of that barrier across girls and boys is a good early learning experience.
So I'm a former teacher. 7 years ago, I was a teacher, and I like to say I couldn't be a CEO without having been a school teacher first. And I'm in the process of starting a foundation to empower young people to get the tools in their hands and the training they need to solve the problems that are going to come up in the future.
That's great. Juliana.
As part of women are part and parcel of the emerging technology story, not only in the iHub in Nairobi, but also in other hubs that have sprouted around Africa. It's something that I'm extremely proud of. I think to participate from the ground up, from the time that the idea of the iHub came up, and there are now groups like Akira Chicks that are holding training camps for underprivileged women to learn about technology, to be exposed to technology. I think the opportunity that we have is to invest in organizations like that are part of this new ecosystem, and to get them to move the needle from not only making applications or mobile apps to actually making and prototyping things like the RoboHand or Brick. But we can use some of these examples and provide the opportunity and the environment for them to do so. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things we're doing through, we're calling this makerspace Gearbox, which I'll be talking with Bree later about, and we invite others to join us to create this space where we can see creativity and different ways of tackling local problems from a local level. And
Shibu, just briefly from you as well.
So I firmly believe that, in today's world, corporations do have a big part to play in this. Because today, if you look at it, the employment generation is by the corporate. The wealth creation is by the corporate. They are the role models. So in India also the similar problem exists. If you look at the education system and the number of women in the science education, the percentage is low. So over the years, we have done a number of interventions. I remember 10 years back, 20% of our workforce was women. Today it is 34%. And we are almost double the percentage of graduating students. So in science and computer science and math, 20% of the graduating students are women, where we are at around 34% and moving ahead. It required a number of interventions. We actually not only have to intervene within, we have to go out and actually work with the college campuses to show role models, to encourage women to join, to tell them that this is something which you can do. So I think corporations do have a part to play, and they need to do it.
That's great. So the technological trends that we've talked about here suggest that the power to make and communicate and connect is no longer in the hands of a few, but in the hands of many. And with that power, I think, comes increased responsibility to participate in solving some of the world's hardest problems. And I'd like to give you just an example of the kind of thing that can happen when we harness that kind of diversity and scale. And I'd like to tell it through a story, the story of Foldit. So Foldit was the invention of Zoran Popovich and David Baker, computer scientist and a biochemist at the University of Washington. And in 2008, they created a protein folding game. Now, they launched it, and 240,000 people have played or started to play the game. Now, the thing that they're trying to solve for is the three-dimensional folded structure of proteins. It's a very difficult biochemistry problem, and it's important because misfolded proteins create things like mad cow disease, Alzheimer's, cystic fibrosis, and correctly folded proteins can block pathways for HIV and block other cellular evildoers. It's a very tough problem. So in 2011, the gamers in Foldit solved the three-dimensional folded structure of the retroviral protease that contributes to AIDS in rhesus monkeys. The scientific community had not been able to solve that three-dimensional structure for 15 years. The gamers in Foldit solved it in 10 days. That's the power of scale and diversity and access. The success of Foldit is an example of what happens when we can harness the minds of many, the magic that can happen when we're able to do that. Foldit started really as the optimistic idea of a few nerds who believed they could build a future where a stay-at-home mom could contribute to a cure for cancer. But the magic happened when that opportunity turned into a call for action and thousands answered the challenge. That's the power of scale and diversity. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists, Bree, Juliana, Anne, and Shibu, and thank you.